G'day podcasters, welcome back to Season 4 of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. We'd like to thank Tactical Recovery for sponsoring this show. Head on over to tacticalrecovery.com.au and use the code TRUEBLUE for one hell of a discount. Tactical Recovery, magnesium-based muscle care, salty products for sore fuckers. Welcome, loyal listeners of True Blue Conversations. Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Australian Warfighter Coffee. Veteran owned and run, driven by a simple yet powerful motto: people over profit. Every dollar goes towards supporting veterans and first responder charity groups. Head on over to AustralianWarfighters.com and use the code TRUEBLUE for your exclusive discount. Because let's face it, any other coffee is just brown sadness water. Now, let's get on with the show. Raise your glasses, podcasters. This episode of True Blue Conversations is brought to you by Wet Canteen Bottling Company, the perfect way to commemorate and celebrate life's most special occasions. Elevate your moments, savour the taste, and make them truly unforgettable with Wet Canteen. Head on over to wetcanteenbottlingco.com.au and use the code TRUEBLUE for your exclusive discount. Now, on with the show.
G'day! Welcome to True Blue Conversations. I'm Adam Bloom. Today's special guest is former SASR and Commando veteran Jordan McCallum. And Jordan is a retired corporal, and he's joined us today to talk about his career in the ADF and his deployments to Afghanistan and also his life after service. Hi, Jordan. Thanks for joining us on the show, mate.
G'day, Adam. Yeah, thanks for having me, mate. Excited.
Mate, it's an absolute honour and a privilege to have you on the show, mate. So, Jordan, can you just tell us a little bit about you as a young fella? Where did you grow up? What was school like for you? And what sport did you play?
Yeah, so I grew up in Logan, which is southeast Queensland, and pretty run-of-the-mill type upbringing, I suppose. I played basketball a lot, was a mad Michael Jordan fan, and also rugby union as well.
Yeah,
so that was my sporting background.
Yeah, right. Yep. Yeah, mate. I think everyone was in the 90s. Everyone was at Michael Jordan. Everyone had the basketball cards.
I'm still a mad fan, mate.
He's amazing dude.
He's
mate.
the GOAT.
Mate, absolutely. I will agree. I will agree with that, mate. I will say that he is the GOAT because Kobe and that came after him.
Yeah,
and,
LeBron.
LeBron, and but no, he was the GOAT. So what was school like for you?
Yeah, school for me was pretty boring. I never really enjoyed school. It was boring. It was good. I've met some good friends that I still keep in contact with these days. I've got a sort of pretty close, sort of tight-knitted friends from high school. And really nothing sort of to tell there. Just normal upbringing in Logan, mate. A lot of fights, a lot of sort of survival tactics used, but
set you up for later life, mate. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
so you go to obviously your first job? What was your first job after school?
My first job was working at KFC.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then, so did you have any family members that had served in the military before you, or were you the first?
So, yes, I did, but we're not a military family by any means, and it was never really spoken about during my upbringing, but my grandpa did serve in the Air Force, and he was in Darwin when the Japanese bombed.
Yep.
And also, my grandpa's brother, he actually served in the army but drowned during a river crossing on an exercise, which I actually didn't find out until probably about 6 years ago.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, right.
Yeah, so other than that, a little bit of history there, but not too much.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So for you, what was the main reason for you wanting to join the army?
I was going nowhere really quick. I didn't have any direction.
Yep.
And I thought it'd be a good idea. It was a bit of an adventure, a challenge, and it was all of that for sure. But also, I wanted to do something that was, good for the world as well. I wanted to help as well. So, yeah, so a few of those sort of characteristics came out. Yeah,
Yeah, right. And so everyone remembers where they were when 9/11 happened, and where were you? And was that a big driving factor of you joining the army at that stage, or was it something else?
I had already signed up.
Yep.
So I'd signed up probably September 11, 2001. So I enlisted in 2002 in February, 19th of February.
Yep.
So it was, 4 or 5 months after 9/11. It
Yep.
took me 9 months to go through the process at recruiting in Brisbane. So I was working full-time at a cabinet making factory down on the Gold Coast. And yeah, I remember when 9/11 happened, I actually didn't find out till September 12 because I was starting work the next day at 5 a.m. 5 a.m. start, so get up at 4 and head down there, and there was a newspaper already obviously printed, and it had obviously September 11 trade towers falling down, and I was like, wow, this is full on, and I was 18 then, and a few of the guys were. Because they all knew I'd planned to join the army and all this type of thing. They're like, oh, mate, keep your phone ready. They're going to be calling you up. And I was like, obviously 18-year-old going, oh, yeah, no worries. So actually naively thought that potentially they might call up and, because who knows, it probably, potentially could have happened. But looking back now, it was like, yeah, a bit of a joke. So that happened, and it still took me, like I said, 4 or 5 months to get in to the military. From September 11.
Yeah, okay.
But, I do remember the morning quite significantly, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I remember it too, mate, because I was 8 years old, and mate, I was like, "Where's Cheese TV?" Where's Cheese TV? And I was getting ready for school, and I remember it being that. Yeah, I was like, "What's going on here?" Mate, I actually thought it was a movie. I actually thought. This is a movie. And then when I saw the second plane hit the Tower 2, I was like, oh, actually, no, this is not a movie. This is for real. And that day changed the world, mate. Everyone remembers where they were, what they were doing at the exact moment. And I remember watching the footage of the second plane hitting. And yeah, it was full on, mate. It was, and for us, for our generation, you're a little bit older than me, and I remember 9/11, Bali bombings, the tsunami in 2004, the amount of change in prime ministers, and that was just a revolving thing. That
the Rudd Gillard Rudd era.
Yeah, and then so I remember all that, and it's just in my short 30 years, I've seen so much change, and you've seen so much change in your short life as well. And it's like, holy crap, this has been huge. And I think, yeah, mate, been a testing time, hasn't it, in history?
And it's just getting crazier.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's getting any better.
No. And I think for you, so you enlist, and we obviously know now that everyone's like, oh, we're going to go to war, and that was bit premature. It sort of happened a few years later, many years later, and you'd gone into battalion life at that stage. And what was your memories of Kapooka like? What was it?
Yeah,
because you're obviously 18, so still young fella, 18. Was that a shock and awe? Oh my God, what have I got myself into? Or was it exactly what you thought it would be?
Oh, definitely shock and probably just. Well, it wasn't traumatic, but to a certain degree, it was definitely a stress on the nervous system.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, so that was, they talk culture shock, and it was exactly that. I remember, sort of eating my first few meals at my desk in my room at Kapooka, and all. Yeah, it was. At those initial stages, quite isolated. You hadn't really. I think the first 24 hours was quite isolating. I remember that because I like to socialise and I like to be around other people, like most people in the Defence Force. We're sort of team-orientated type people. So I remember that was like the first 24 hours just thinking I think I've made a mistake here. I've bitten off more than I can chew.
Yeah.
And then you get into it, and there's one thing about basic training or the military is there's no time to think.
Yeah.
You're just in you're taking orders and you're busy from 6 o'clock in the morning, sometimes 5:30. I can't remember exactly what time they're waking us up every day. And till 10 o'clock at night, doing all these, learning how to be a soldier, So there was no time. Back then in 2002, it was 6.5 weeks long, or maybe 7. I can't remember exactly. I know it's sort of 12, I think, these days. But so there was literally no time to do anything except get trained in all the basics of soldiering.
Yeah,
and
right.
Yeah, so it was an experience. I definitely didn't enjoy it. For me it was just a busy time. Like I made some good friends there, but it was like a time where there was no downtime either.
Yep.
So I'm a person that likes to enjoy things and take time out and socialise and that. So it was, other than having a quick 5-6 minutes at the mess hall to chow down your food really quickly, there wasn't a lot of downtime.
Yep. Yeah, right. And then, so you finish Kapooka, and then you go to your initial training. So is it
IET's initial employment training.
Yeah. So you went to obviously you went to Singleton, and
that's right.
What was that like? Was that another shock? Like going, because obviously they say, I've spoken to a few veterans, and they say, they've got on this is where soldiering starts at Kapooka and all that sort of thing, but then they said the shock is you get to Singleton and it's a different beast in itself. So what was that like when you went to Singleton?
Yeah, that was again a shock to the system, and that was really where they turn you into an infantryman.
Yeah.
So I was, you're not a civilian anymore. You turn into an infantryman, and I really sort of found that during Singleton it was a steep learning curve for me. Like I was never a person that just learnt really quickly and didn't, like I always struggled. For me, the way I learn is I learn a little bit slower at the start, but once I get something, I get it, and then I get usually a really good proficiency from then on. But for me at the time, if there's a bit of stress involved, then sometimes it's harder at that stage for my mind to concentrate to actually listen to what is going on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right.
Looking back at the time, I had no idea, but now looking back, and throughout courses after course, that's sort of a pattern that I sort of saw and observed over time.
Yep. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then what battalion were you posted to when you got, so from your at Singleton? What battalion did you end up in?
I ended up in 4RAR.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
I think most of us. There was either 1, 2RAR or 5-7 was the 3 battalions that my platoon was going to,
And then, so and they were based North Queensland, is that where one's based? Or
Townsville,
Townsville,
1
So what was that like when you got to Townsville? Was that, what are your memories of Townsville?
Yeah, it's interesting looking back, actually, because my first night in Townsville, I remember we were flying from Sydney to Townsville, and we got off the flight on the bus straight to Laverack Barracks, and it was like out of a movie scene. Like there was a lot of Black Hawks flying around. And I didn't know right on that night, but I think the next day and the following days, the recon and snipers were doing a lot of their suspended extraction and repelling serials out of the Black Hawks up there.
Yeah, right, okay.
Which happens maybe once a year.
Yeah.
So, but I just happened, the whole platoon ended up going there on that night.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was like watching a Vietnam movie. Like I was actually playing out of it because we got chucked into the old ghetto lines. It wasn't the newer lines that, people are sort of familiar with now. It's the old ghetto lines where it was like literally the Vietnam buildings that the battalions were stacked out on with holes in the wall, louvers missing, fans that were crooked and sort of, so it was almost like out of Apocalypse Now sort of. And that was literally what it felt like choppers flying around till 10, 11 at night. And that was my first night in the battalion. So I was like sitting here going, wow, this really is the army. Because I'd never been to Townsville before either.
Yep.
So I was just like, wow, this is cool. Choppers, I've always, loved choppers, and the thought of jumping in and out is a massive motivator for me. But quickly, I realised three days after that serial was finished that it was not the norm, and we probably didn't see another chopper there for another 12 months. So,
right. Okay. Right. And then, so what was it like on battalion life? Like you'd now got to battalion, regiment, was it just go like your training, go bush, all that sort of like master your craft after you'd gone to singleton, and was that what it was like at the battalion or?
Yeah, so back then it was gearing, or East Timor was the flavour of the day.
Okay, yeah, right.
And 4RAR knew that they were deploying to East Timor in 2003. So at that stage, probably, probably 12 in another 12 months. So that the battalion would be deploying there. So that was the focus of the training was gearing up towards a battalion deployment to East Timor in 2003. So that really guided the training continuum.
Yeah, right. And you deployed. You did deploy over in 2003 to East Timor. And what was your role over there? What were you doing was it a sort of a mentoring role, or what was happening on that deployment when you were over there?
So it was at that stage it was UMASET. I can't remember exactly what the acronym stands for, but so it was. I think it started off Interfet, UNTIET, then UMASET was the third iteration. So it was still a UN chartered peacekeeping mission.
Yep. Still
warlike operations, even though, arguably, well, compared to Afghanistan, it definitely wasn't a warlike scenario that we're used to now. But it was, infantry. So I was in Alpha Company. We were 3 months occupied Batagade FOB.
Yep.
And also the last 3 months was Maliana.
Okay. Yeah, right.
For Alpha Company, yes.
And what did you like? What did you take away from that deployment that you learnt about yourself while you were over in country?
Yeah, so that 6 months was where I really sort of got comfortable with being a soldier. Like I actually felt like I was a soldier after that deployment.
Yep.
And it was nothing Gucci about that deployment, but it was just doing the basics a lot every day, So the rotations there was a lot of blue hat patrols, but also green hat patrols as well. So, out in the jungle, bush, sort of cammed up, all that kind of stuff. So for an infantryman, it was, the perfect environment to really root out your core skills.
Yep.
Yeah, it was like I look back at that time and just, that deployment made a soldier out of me and definitely set me up for the rest of my career.
So you end up, obviously we know that the jungle is, it can be unforgiving, and you would have learnt that over when you were over in East Timor. And
bit of Lantana.
A bit of Lantana. Oh, God, I love Lantana. Not cutting it now for my job, mate. I hate it. Yeah, absolutely. I hate Lantana. It's so thick and doesn't burn, and it's crap. But I know exactly what you're talking about. Lantana, great weed. Anyway, so you come back from your deployment to East Timor, and you went down the Special Forces path. And how did this come about? And had you been thinking about Special Forces for some time? And what drew you to go for selection for 4RAR Commando, now the 2nd Commando Regiment?
Yeah, so I was 19 when I was in East Timor, and when I made the decision to go down to 2 Commando, I was still really young. So at that time I thought that there's no way that I'm ready for the SAS. So it was, for me, looking back, it was a good decision to go to 2 Commando. And a lot of the guys in 4RAR, or there's a couple of guys specifically in Alpha Company that had already trained up and was going to 2 Commando, like on their CTC. And I was talking to those guys and, or seeing their preparation run around the battalion area. I sort of saw that what their preparation was like. So then I was thinking that sort of planted the seeds, and sort of like, okay, well, maybe I'll give that a crack as well.
So, and you talk about that, like you talk about, you're watching those guys. How did you mentally prepare for selection? Because, it was grueling. Was there any books that you read on, developing? Because everyone knows it's, a lot of it's meant, and you've done a lot of work since, and obviously we get to your selection for SAS later. Was there was there anything that you did mentally to prepare you for selection at that time, and especially being so young?
Not really, no. Like, I just remembered just getting into the core skills and making sure that my fitness was up to standard. Mentally, I honestly, and back then, like, I don't think there was as much around the mental training mentally for SF and that. It was just not really sort of, everyone sort of knew that you have to be mentally strong, but these days there's a lot more awareness about, mental health and having a strong mind and that.
Yeah.
Back then it was really just simple of just making sure my body was right and I was fit enough and giving it a crack. Yeah, I really didn't look too much further into it, to be honest.
Right.
Yeah.
So what
Probably a little bit unprepared now thinking about it.
And what year was that? What year did you go for selection? Was that 2004?
2004.
Yeah, okay, yeah, right. And so how many started selection with you and how many finished the course with you?
Yeah, good question. I can't remember exactly, but it was a big intake. So I think it was at least 150, and then I think at least 70, 75 people ended up starting and commencing the reinforcement cycle. Yeah, it was a big intake.
Yep.
They ended up having to essentially run 2 reinforcement cycles
Right.
parallel.
And was were you guys, was your selection, did you, with the direct entrant guys? Like So that was, so you guys had both. So it was that one of the first that was run with the direct recruit? Yeah.
It wasn't I think it was the third one.
Okay. Yeah, right.
So there'd been a couple previous,
Yeah, okay. Yeah, right. And then once you'd passed selection, what do you remember? Obviously, because we get to your SASR selection later, like we'll talk about that later on. But what do you remember of what was the toughest part of your 2 commando selection? What do you have any memories of what was the hardest part for that when you looking back now?
Yeah, I do. Demarcation for sure. I mean, some of the PT sessions were very full on.
Yeah,
like hours and hours of 2 or 3 hours just to lifting ammo boxes and running around. Demarcation was definitely the hardest, where it was just like a sleep deprivation, carrying things, or up at night just doing different tasks just to keep ticking away. So that was definitely was the hardest part. And
and is it demarcation? Is that 2 days or?
I think it's 72 hours, so 3 days.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Far out, mate. So eventually you're just a zombie pretty much. Like you just become a zombie because you just there's no sleep, no food. Is that, or it's like it's just basically just water? Like what?
I think I'm looking. Yeah, I can't remember sleeping or eating during the whole time.
Yeah,
so
right.
It was full on.
Yeah, okay, right. Yeah. And for you, I guess, because you were 20 at the time, 20.
I had my 21st birthday on the CTC.
Yeah,
actually.
right. Yeah. So right. So. And I guess for you, passing selection, what was that like for you? Was that a proud moment? Like you obviously you go into the Rio cycle after that. Like I understand it's selection's only. It's the only. I had someone you served with, Damien Tomlinson. I spoke to him the other night actually, and he said, mate, that's only the start. Like you pass selection. He's like, that's the start. Then you've got the Rio cycle, and he's like, that's where it starts. And he's like, then you've got to constantly keep performing to stay in the regiment. Like and that, I guess for you, looking back now, you go, okay, I've passed selection, proud moment, but then you go into the Rio cycle. And what was that like for you, the Rio cycle? What did you find the hardest during your Rio cycle? Yeah,
so I think there's a lot of false summits on reinforcement cycle, especially after, when you finish selection. Just like on a run or a hike, you're hiking along, slogging away, and then you get to what you think is the summit, and then you get there and you realise there's a bigger mountain in the far ground to continue. So that's definitely what it's like in SF and training and all the continuums and reinforcement cycles for sure.
Yep.
On Rio, I just could not believe the variety of training on the Commando reinforcement cycle, as in, coming from 1RAR, it was always just go to high range or bush skills or, all that type of thing. Going to Commando, we would, you're going into a lot of different areas. So amphibious, demolitions, you're doing the jungle stuff too, but also urban, it's just, I couldn't believe, the saturation of skill sets in there. I was just, as an infantryman, I was just frothing at the mouth. Just couldn't believe it. I was loving it. Yeah,
and because you did your close quarter, that was part of it as well, like your close quarter
CQB.
Yeah, CQB.
No, at that stage it wasn't. No.
Oh,
so
right.
That
Okay.
came in. I think. I'm not sure but that wasn't a part of the reinforcement cycle when I was at 2 Commando.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, right. So that was something that come in later. Yeah, right.
Yeah, because it's urban, and then it would have been probably around, don't hold me to this accurately, but around 2010 maybe it started getting introduced.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you finish the reinforcement cycle. And what company were you posted to after Rio?
Alpha Company.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so what was that like for you finally? Like you'd passed selection, you'd passed Rio, and you got your beret. Like what was that like for you?
Well, we didn't actually have a beret parade.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. I know they've changed that a lot now.
Yep.
But we never had a beret parade, so that was disappointing.
Yeah, right.
And so we just literally got, you're not on Rio anymore. You get posted Alpha Company, and that's it. Sort of. So it was. I know they've changed that a lot now, and there's a lot more effort. And the moment and the occasion is more sort of celebrated, which is good and needed.
Yeah.
But at that stage it was literally like, qualified now, get into it. So,
yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, right. And then so you get to Alpha Company, and then you deploy to Afghanistan. Your first deployment. What year was that?
So it wasn't. So it was actually an interesting time because our exercises in 2000 when was it? It would have been end of 2004, the start of 2005 when I went to Alpha Company was a very busy time.
Yeah, okay.
When it came to exercising.
Yeah.
Like we were very busy in doing the full suite of different exercises. So Talisman Sabre with Amphib and target prosecution up there. So that's when the call came out from government that Afghanistan Ops Slipper was coming out and commandos were going to send a contingent there.
Yep.
And it was Alpha Company, but it was a company at that stage. The contingent size was a company minus, so only a platoon. So we had 3 platoons in Alpha Company, and only 1 platoon went over.
Yeah, okay.
Literally, it was 1 platoon. So the rest of us actually got moved on to Delta Company, and that was the re-raising of back then 4RAR Delta Company. So we all went across to Delta Company and then started looking at rotation 3 in 2006. So that's how it all sort of went down for me, yeah.
And I suppose that was a busy time around that time as well, because we had the Commonwealth Games in Australia as well. So there was a busy time around the regiment. Like you had a lot, like you had Afghanistan happening, then you had the Commonwealth Games. So it would have been a busy time. And so you deploy in 2006 was your first deployment to...
Yeah, SOTG 3,
Yep.
2006.
So what was that like for you when you boots on the ground in country, first time, it's very different to your East deployment, East Timor deployment. Like you're in a sandpit now, you're not in a jungle. So what was that like for you? And what do you remember of your first time in Afghanistan?
Yeah, I just couldn't believe it was all happening. I was in a really good patrol, really good platoon. Brett Wood was my team commander. And when we got there, it was just initially the first week or two, we did a lot of trips to the governor's compound in TK. And that was really good just for kind of sinking into the area, sort of getting the spider senses tingling. And I just couldn't believe the infrastructure there. It was literally like just, a lot of mud hut buildings, and looking back, like, stepping into a sort of a biblical sort of environment and time frame. It was mind blowing, especially as a young 20-year-old, as in early 20s.
Yeah.
It was mind-blowing, actually.
Yeah, right. And did you have much interaction with the locals on that first deployment, or that you can remember, or not really?
Yeah, we always have interactions with the locals, as in, during on your patrols and your key leadership engagements and little shorers with village elders and all that. So, and when we went to the governor's compound a few times, there was a lot of sort of movement around there when it comes to different Afghani personnel as well. So it was it was all good experiences. Yeah. Yep.
So what do you remember of your first patrol outside the wire at TK? What was that like for you?
Yeah, so the first patrol would have been the governor's compound.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So that was pretty benign, to be honest, for a first patrol.
Yeah.
We didn't. Our first contact would have been probably maybe a month into the trip.
Yep.
Being in country, yeah. So that was on the way back from Chora Valley back to TK, and yeah, so that was honest, looking back, was probably the best circumstances for a first contact, was because the Taliban tried to ambush us.
Yeah.
But we had sort of some intelligence prior to that, and we could actually see combatants moving into the area, moving into ambush position. So we were able to sort of flank around and come up into a bit of high ground, and were able to observe the enemy in moving into an ambush area for us.
Yeah,
so
right,
then where
okay.
we really sort of came up on top of them, and it was a, looking from a first contact point of view, it was really a really good situation to be the first contact, because we had the upper hand the whole time.
Yeah, right. And for you as a young fella, like, I guess people talk about that first contact, that first because obviously in East Timor it was totally different to what you'd experienced before. For you, like, this is for real now. Like, your live rounds are coming at you, and what was going through your mind? Was it like, oh, all right, this is this is real now, like, this is the real shit, or what was it for you?
Yeah, I just couldn't believe it was actually happening.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was really, your training kicks in. I mean, the training is that world class that you're actually thinking, wow, is this actually real? Like, in the middle of sort of changing ammo liners and making sure that all your sighting's correct. I was fairly busy. So yeah, it was everything that I'd hoped for, actually, in the first contact.
Yeah, okay.
Everything went really smoothly.
Yep.
Everyone got into a good tactical maneuver.
Yep.
And yeah, we really came up on top of them, came out really unscathed. And the first contact, even one of the guys in my team fired a javelin.
Yeah,
so
right.
that was pretty incredible, just to sit there and momentarily the whole battlefield just stopped and looked across with this javelin sort of.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so that was unreal. So little things like that, yeah, it was good.
So obviously they talk about training, and that was a really good example of that. The training had paid off. All those long days, long nights of training. Just really, everyone knew what they were doing, and it was just like a well-oiled machine. Pretty well, just right, we're into it. Let's go, bang, bang, bang. And then, so how long was your first deployment for? How long were you over there for?
I think it was 4.5 months. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. And then obviously while you're over there, was there anyone that was wounded in action or killed in action at that point?
So on that trip, it was Op Perth. So that was, we had on that Op Perth in one day, we had, I think it was, don't hold me to this, it was about 6 WIA. So it was from a RPG.
Yep.
Airburst over our position. Arguably there's a saying, or not a saying, but generally at 1,000 meters is where the RPGs detonate. So technically they think it was from a RPG enemy fighter from about 1,000 meters away firing it to ambush. Airburst over our position, and that was team commanders that got fragged, and,
Yeah.
and Brett Wood was one of those guys.
Yeah, right.
But I remember Brett Wood, and so the airburst happened, and Brett Wood, everyone, like, there was, momentarily we lost momentum and initiative, and just we were bogged down essentially. And Brett Wood just looked around and obviously, without numbering off, just said, I can't remember the call sign that we were, but essentially, guys, are we all good? So we all looked around. There's about 6 of us, and said, yeah, we're good. So all numbered off type thing. And he just said, yep, on me. And then we sort of got up and just followed him. He just ran off behind cover, and then we were able to make entry into another compound, and then we started doing our CQB and fighting through the compound.
Yeah,
and then
right.
that enabled us to, because we were actually caught out in the open, not in the open, but it was like without much cover.
Yep.
It was like, during the in between the wheat fields and all that, and so we were able to make entry into the compound, and which enabled us to secure an area and then to move all the casualties into an area and provide that CASEVAC essentially.
Yeah, right.
So that was my first under fire leadership and command that really sort of stood out. It was Brett Wood just saying, on me, guys, like, this is how it's done, and just took off, and we ended up all just running after him, and because we were all inexperienced back then as in combat operations, but that was, I'll never forget that day for sure.
Was that where he was awarded his Medal for Gallantry? Was that action where he was that action that he was awarded that?
Yeah, so he was actually fragged in the foot.
Yep.
During that incident, and so no one knew that he was fragged until I think a day or two later, where he actually, he knew he was fragged, but then he sort of told people. So he was fragged, and also, so only sort of found out subsequently that, he did receive a fragmentation from that, and ended up getting CASEVAC'd a few days later.
Yeah, okay, right.
But he did receive the MG for that. Yeah.
Yeah, that I've heard so much about him, that he was just he's just an absolute natural leader, led from the front. Just everything he did was just precise, and just, he was just a true, he was just a really great soldier, and I know, unfortunately he died, a few years later, which was a shame, and just rest in peace, Brett. He just really nice. Really, I've heard so many great stories from a lot of good blokes that knew him, and one of your former COs spoke very highly of him, and I know that there's a lot of good things said about Brett, and it's a shame that he paid the ultimate sacrifice, and definitely, from your sense, a really good, great mentor for you as well as a young soldier coming through the ranks. Yeah,
definitely, and it wasn't only just that action, like obviously that action as well, but just throughout the whole deployment too, his conduct, and even subsequently after that on TAG East, when we were in the same team as well for a little while there, and it's just Brett was Brett, you know, like there wasn't any, he was just himself, but himself was like just a really good dude, really good guy, and just ultra competent and proficient at his skill sets.
Right. And then so you have that, and then you come back. So you come back from your first deployment, and how did you think you went over there, and was it what you thought? Was it everything you thought it would be before you deployed? Yeah.
So it was. Yeah. I only got maybe a month off. I think I got a month off. And then I come back, and I was nominated to go on a CQB course and go to TAG East. Yep. So that was for me. It all happened really quickly, and I got nominated. One of the only, I think it was maybe 2 guys from our platoon to get nominated for that course. So it was a privilege to actually be nominated. It was fairly competitive back then. So to get nominated, was a privilege back then, because back then it was just before the Afghan happened. The place to be was TAG East. That was the premier area of the unit to get to. I know a lot of things have changed now, but that was a mentality back then. So to go up and to be put or nominated and to be on a CQB course was it was a privilege, but also, that course is a very, very stressful one. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So you had to work, like, obviously, because you said that, you're a learner that takes you a little bit to get that, like, to learn the skill, but then once was that a hard, like, you would have been smashed on that course, I'm guessing, like, day and night, just would have been, high tempo, like, to get you up to that standard.
Yeah.
What was that like for you, the learning? Like, did you have to really concentrate and focus, or what?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was a stage, when was it? That was the end of 2006. So at that stage, the facilities weren't up to a good standard at Holsworthy.
Yeah.
And that when the course was broken up from into your Sydney time, but also you had to go to Perth and use the ranges over there.
Yeah, right.
So that the first 2 weeks was the shooting component, and I've always been a fairly good shot.
Yep.
But it was a CQB and running through the house, and the tactics was like there's a lot of moving parts and keeping within that safety barriers at the start. Yeah, it's a very stressful period, and I got through it. But it was it's not one of those courses where people excel at. Like people are always on the back foot. There's always little mistakes happening here or there. You just sort of hope that the mistakes you use are minor ones and not big ones that the instructors see.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
can you tell us a little bit about you found yoga and it helped you through your Special Forces career in 2007, and I want to expand on this a little bit. What was it about yoga that helped you and prolonged your Special Forces career?
Yeah, so I was complaining just to a mate about having a really sore back and neck, and it was affecting the way, because I was doing a lot of time with body armor on, like a lot of heavy stuff. And it was after, so in that same year, I just did a 4.5 month trip to Afghanistan, and I was in the behind the Mark 19 in the cupola wearing body armor, so a lot of bouncing around and a lot of fighting compound to compound, so a lot of time with body armor on. And then I got back, and then again a lot of time at the range shooting and in the house, like the kill house, so to speak, where you do all your inside tactics. And that was just a lot of time, a lot of compression on my spine, a lot of weight on my neck. So I couldn't sleep properly. That was obviously affecting my recovery. And I was getting like headaches and migraines and stuff. So I was getting like 2 massages a week, and that wasn't, you get some temporary respite, but it wasn't actually working. And I was complaining about it to one of my friends, and he just said, come down and try a hot yoga, Bikram's yoga. And I'd never really, I think I'd heard of yoga, but I obviously didn't know anything about it. And I was like, okay, you think it will help, one of your mates that I respected. And so I went down there one evening after work, and it was back then it was a 90 minute, 26 postures, 2 breathing exercises in 37 degree heat. Mate, it was hot in there, and it was a interesting experience, as most people can attest to, people that have done a Bikram's yoga session, especially the 90 minutes. I know they've brought it back to 60 minutes these days because 90 minutes is a long time, but it was afterwards I just felt this like looseness in my spine and my neck, and my pain just went away.
Yeah, right.
Like it'd come back every now and then, but if I had to really incorporate and be smart into my training program to factor in when I could, 1 or 2 yoga sessions a week.
Yeah, right.
When the training program permitted. There was a lot of times where you go away, I wouldn't do it for 2 months, but I'd come back to base, then I'd do it twice a week and it'd get better. And that was the kind of sort of pattern that formed. Obviously, I'd go away for deployment, wouldn't do it for 6 months, but come back and sort of incorporate it. And I really found that was just like incredibly beneficial. So it's touch wood, I haven't had any surgery on my spine, but I attest the regular yoga sessions for not going down in the surgery route.
Yeah, right.
I really attest that to preventing that.
So finding yoga was really that sort of saving grace sort of moment that actually sort of helped you going down staying in SF a lot longer than what you could have. It could have been a short temporary SF career.
Definitely, exactly. And I was really, at the time, I was really stressed out about it because, you know, I'd done one trip. I was on Tag East, like loving it, just going, this is incredible. And then had this injury. I was like, man, I'm only early 20s. Like, what's going on? And so it was. I was incredibly lucky to be introduced to it that early on and to have that effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we obviously you're gearing up for your second deployment to Afghanistan, and how prevalent was the IED threat in that? Obviously in your third and fourth, it was really prevalent later on. But in your second, do you remember? Was it not as prevalent as it was in the third and fourth tours? Like, what do you remember? Was there much spoken about it in your pre-deployment training and all that sort of stuff? Or
it was. I remember in 2006 there was one of the LRPVs, one of the SAS guys, got hit by a IED. I think it was a V-bit IED. But that was really the only. So we were aware of it. But that was the only incident that on my trips. I can't speak for other rotations. Yeah. But on my rotation 2006, there was one, but not with commandos. In 2008, we were still aware of them, and obviously still within our tactics, you know, tried to obviously search for them, etc. But we were very lucky, touch wood, that we didn't have any encountered on our 2008 trip, and we drove around a lot. We spent more, or you spend a lot of time outside of the wire regardless, but I just remember, you know, we'd go out for over a month at a time on that 2008 trip.
Yeah,
going from valley to valley.
So long range patrols, all that sort of thing, or?
The terminology of long range, in Afghanistan, arguably you probably weren't long range like they did in Iraq or sort of back in, you know, sort of World War II or whatever. Sterling crossing the desert wasn't that. But because we had so much resupply coming along, like they could just do, you know, a CH-47 resupply. Yeah. You know, so that was, and the SRVs aren't set up for long range either, but we were out for a long time getting resupplied for sure. And there was a lot of times where we'd blow CV joints, diffs, all that type of thing. Yep. And sometimes we'd have to get the mechanics heloed out. Yep. I remember one of our guys, he was a qualified mechanic, so he was under the bonnet a lot. Yep. Did a lot of long hours under the bonnet trying to fix a lot of the issues. So yeah, it was incredible patrol actually to be out that long. But yeah, it wasn't. I suppose it was a long time frame, but it wasn't really a long range in the traditional sense, I suppose.
Yeah, right. And obviously, you were over there in 2006, and had the country gone forward when you went back in 2008? Like, or was it? Or did it stay the same? Or
good question, I suppose. Well, yeah, it's hard to tell actually. Like, it's because it was moving forward. I know there was a lot of more infrastructure and schools being built, hospitals. I know the engineers were building bridges and that. So when you talk about progression as in physical infrastructure, there was a lot more. Yeah. I mean, when you talk about the human terrain and progression, hearts and minds, etc., I mean, that's probably another discussion to be had at a different level with someone that was involved heavily with that area. But I mean, it's, especially these days, and considering what has happened there, I mean, I don't think you could really say and put a line in the sand or pinpoint a time where you could say there was a lot of progression within the human terrain over there. Like, it was a very fluid environment. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And what do you, obviously, as you said, you know, you were doing a lot of vehicle, you know, like outside the wire, and what was different about your 2008 trip compared to your 2006 trip? Was there different type of fighting as well, like different, like going in and doing different missions? And obviously don't want to, you know, touch on, you know, the secret stuff, but very different to what you were doing there in 2006?
Well, in 2006, it was literally the wild, wild west. I mean, there was no conventional forces there, so it was literally go out and see what you can find. there wasn't a lot of intelligence around. I mean, there was a little bit, but not too much because no coalition forces had been or spent time in Chora Valley, for example, which is the main focus for 2006. 2008, we went all over Oruzgan. Like we went up to, well, our last patrol was in Gizab. So, the very northern perimeter of Oruzgan province.
Yeah, right.
But we travelled all throughout Oruzgan, and so we got a lot further north in our 2008 trip than the 2006 because we had secured areas around TK, Chora Valley, Mirambad, all those type of areas. And now, conventional forces and the infantry guys were occupying those valleys. So it was more, 2008 was sort of, going out to the frontiers, so to speak, and really sort of finding out and gaining intelligence on different villages.
Yeah, okay. And were you doing sort of mixed with the British and the Americans as well, or were they in other areas, or were you sort of intertwined together, or
in 2008?
Yeah.
In 2008, I don't remember having a lot of interaction at the tactical level with Americans and British.
Yep.
The British were a lot, obviously, in Helmand, to the province to the west of Oruzgan, but we had a few Americans there. And again, I know other elements of SOTG would have had experience in shared patrols with Americans. Like I can't remember what year Dono was awarded
2008.
his VC. So there was, obviously, the SAS guys were doing things with the Americans for that, but for the commandos at that, we weren't, for that trip, we weren't too heavily involved. We had whole commando CCG, so commando company group rolling around. So we had a big signature on the ground, it was huge.
Okay. And did you, on that trip, did you lose any guys, or were you made it through that rotation without any loss of life?
No, on that rotation, we lost Lance Corporal Jason Marks.
Oh, right, okay,
27th of April, 2008,
Yeah, right, I remember that, I actually remember that, mate. I remember the day that it actually popped up on the news that he'd passed, and that was out on patrol, wasn't it? You guys were out on a patrol at that point?
Like I said, it was a crazy day, man. It was... So my platoon was doing like a KLE, like a key leadership engagement to the south, only maybe three kilometres. And there come reports of enemy fighters moving into fortified positions in the valley to the north. And we still had another commando platoon and recon snipers sort of around the area who were able to observe all these enemy movements. And... we literally walked into an ambush. So it was, if I never thought it would have been possible to a whole CCG being brought to its knees, but that's exactly what happened. Like it was a rude awakening, as in to see how successful having a position that was camouflaged and fortified and able to interlock arcs in a valley. So you could... I can't remember exactly how big the enemy footprint was, but definitely wasn't 100 commandos. So probably sort of 90. But it was that day we got our asses handed to us. So it was it was not a fun day, and to say the least. And I think maybe 5 or 6 other guys got shot and seriously wounded as well. So that was probably in Afghanistan. And I hope that was the worst day.
Yeah, right, okay. Right.
And on that trip,
And because I guess, for us, like looking in as civilians, mate, we would go, what's, because I know most people go, oh, the enemy are just, they're stupid, but they're not. They were sophisticated people. Like, the enemy were sophisticated in what they were doing, mate, and they gave just as good a fight as what we gave to them. Like, and you were on the ground, you saw it firsthand. So, and they were always adapting their tactics too, weren't they? Like, that every time you went, the tactics were changing every time for their side of their fighting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of these guys had fought the Russians in the 80s, so and the terrain hadn't changed.
Yeah.
So they would have had the experience of the home ground advantage, and another occupying force in their country coming into the same valleys. I mean, they would have just hit and repeat in their tactics. All they would have to do was make sure their guns were oiled and serviceable, and and we walked into it. So we learnt very quickly from then on to change our tactics, and sort of listen to the intelligence picture a bit more. But it was definitely a rude awakening, and I can't speak for everyone on that trip, but I just remember looking around, and it's like any professional fighter, you win some, you lose some. And that was definitely one that we got beaten, and pretty comfortably from their side of things. I'd say.
And what was obviously what was the effect of Jace's death on the boys, like with you, and you were there on the ground that day? Did it just uniform you guys more to this is real now, like we're in the fight to this, we're not gonna let Jace's death be not meaning, like it meant something? And what was that like for you guys as platoons together on the ground when you lost him?
So good question. We went back to TK to lick our wounds essentially and regroup, and we went out there within 24 hours. I think we had one sleep, and then that afternoon or night we reinserted, and then we went through the village using the period of darkness, obviously, but using our technology and our tactics properly to go through and to essentially try and find the person's interests that fit with the intelligence picture within that area. And we were successful then, but that 24 hours, or that 48 hours was was a very busy one. And then after that, then we got time to have the wake and send off for Marksy, but that happened fairly early in the trip. So we, it was a 4.5 month trip, and so it was, you literally had a moment in time where you said goodbye. And that was hard, very hard, but at the same time, you couldn't just sit there and think about what happened. You had a job to do, so you had to crack on, and 3 days later we were back out on more patrols and doing the same thing. So it was looking back now, it's you can't really fathom what it's like. It's because lots happened. You look back, hindsight's a beautiful thing, and you look at the the toll it takes on soldiers and families, but specifically soldiers on that trip. You just don't get time to mourn or compute or try and make sense of things. So I think looking back now, that's when things, after a long period, things can come back. And sort of things do build up for sure, because there's no time to vent or
and decompress. And I guess like you obviously were involved. Like you were there for the ramp service as well when Jace left, or was And that mate, that from what I've been told from a lot of guys who've been to ramps ceremonies over there, and that is such a special moment in everyone comes and pays their final respects, like that in itself is it's closure, if that's the word. It's close, like send like obviously you can't be there for the funeral, but you're still on deployment, and but I guess in a sense for you guys it was right. He's paid the ultimate sacrifice, and now it's all right. We're still like we've got a job to do, and and I guess looking back now, as you said, the decompress hindsight. At the time you were just so focused on the mission, why you're over there, what you're doing, that you didn't really get that time to reflect, and it's only years later that you actually get to reflect on that you'd lost a mate, and a mate out of the the platoon. So absolutely, I think it's a really yeah, it's any soldier would face. It'd be a hard thing to face. Like, you've lost a mate, like, essentially.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, it's one of those things that I don't think anyone on that trip had experienced before. Can't speak for everyone, but I'm pretty sure for Delta Company, that was the first KIA for sure.
Yeah, right, okay. Yeah.
In contemporary times.
And then, obviously, so that was very early on in the trip. You then finish your second deployment, and then you make the decision after your second trip. You come back after 6 years in 4RAR, now to Commando. You made the decision to try and pass selection for SASR. And what memories do you look back on most fondly of your time in 4RAR Commando, now to Commando, for those who don't know what it had a name change in 2009. And how was it for you when you told the boys that, hey, I'm going to go and try for selection in SASR? And what was it like when you got over to Perth, and how were you received over there when you got over to Perth? Yeah,
so it's from someone from 2 Commando or 4RAR crossing over to go to the west, SASR, there's always an element of risk there. In the risk to not only your reputation, but physically as well, but it's very a tribal environment, 2 Commando, and also in Perth as well. And, it got taken a few different ways. Like, some guys almost took it personally. Some guys totally understood and wished me luck and, were very supportive. And it was a bit of 50-50, I don't have the exact numbers on it, but, it was definitely a hard decision. I love my time there. The deployments that I had there were incredible, like more than I could have ever imagined, good and bad. But I just felt like there was a need to go. I felt like it was within my reach. I never thought that I never thought that I would have been in Commandos and have gone to 2 trips to Afghanistan and been in Tag East. Like, for me, I could not believe that this is the life that I was living. But even, and now that all that had happened, and then within my grasp, it was to actually be in contention or to apply for the SAS. I was just like, it's a kind of a moment, an opportunity where I'm like, if I don't give this a crack,
the what if, the regret.
Well, yeah, it's just, just go all out. Like, if you think you can do it, or even if you think you can't, like, give it a go. You just never know. And that was really the situation. And I did like Perth when I went over there on my CQB course in 2006. I actually really liked Perth.
Yep.
I didn't particularly like living in Sydney.
Who does?
Yeah, so it's like, there's elements of Sydney. It's actually incredible, beautiful, but to live there day in, day out, I didn't enjoy it. So there was a few factors there for me crossing over, but yeah, it was mixed responses.
Yeah, okay.
When I got to Perth, it's interesting because a lot of people do ask me all the time, what's it like in both units and all that, because I spent 6 years in both. And for me, I had the unique opportunity to see it from both sides.
Yeah.
I mean, because a lot of people would hear of the rivalry and the tribalism to it, and it's definitely in full swing.
Yeah.
But when I was in Commandos, a lot of the hierarchy, and not everyone, but a lot of the guys were, slagging off SAS guys, saying, they were shit rah-rah and all this type of thing, and all these different stories. And then it's like, okay, yep, sort of, take it with a grain of salt. It's an interesting story, all that type of thing. And
yeah.
And then when I got to Perth, there was the SAS guys. I was saying how shit Commandos were, rah-rah, and all these same stories. I was just like, okay. So I had a good, unique opportunity to see it from both ends.
Yeah.
And I think for me, like, I look at both units as both my family.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, in a way, it's kind of like the SAS being the older brother and 2 Commando being the younger brother, and when you have an older brother that's been around the blocks a few times, very experienced, knows how to move, very confident, doing his thing, but you've got a younger brother that's just as capable, hungry, and very competent, and just wants to get his hands on everything and do everything to the best of his ability. So it's that's the way I kind of see it, in a very sort of subjective, my own personal opinion, type way, and it's kind of just two very capable units, but just obviously highly competitive. And when you're talking about alpha males in a competitive environment, I mean, they're always going to hate the other person, like all the other units. So it's expected. I always tried to, I've got incredible friends still on both sides. Yeah. So for me, it's, just acknowledging the positives and admiring the strengths of both units because they're just, you can, what's that saying? You can sleep soundly at night, knowing that people are going to, do violence on your behalf type thing. But in a sense, that is completely accurate, where it's like Australia can rest easy knowing that you've got these incredible units and these incredible guys that are willing to knock death on the door and to, in the national security area. Yeah. So it's, it is very humbling to know that, Australia's got those quality guys
and capabilities. Yeah. And mate, I think like you've got fond memories of that. You look back at your time in 2 Commando, and then you got fond memories in SASR as well. And I think that's why I wanted to get you on, because you've sort of reached the pinnacle in both. Like you've reached the pinnacle of being the tip of the spear, and also being the pinnacle of SASR. So mate, it's an amazing, like, to even, as you said, to get to, like, as you said, to get to like 2 Commando, 2 trips, tag east, like, mate, you're like, wow. When I joined the army, I had no, I didn't even think that was possible. To then go to, to then be in the SSR as well. It's like, wow, am I living, I've really, but I think it goes to show that if you set the bar high, mate, you can achieve anything. Like if you, with the right mindset, the right discipline, the right focus, you can reach the pinnacle, and you've done that, mate. And that's a credit to you. And then I think if anyone listens to this who's thinking, well, and as you said, it was something that you said in the podcast, that 2 Commando was a great option for you in your younger years, before you obviously matured a lot more for when you went for selection, that little bit older, a little bit wiser, that, it was the perfect stepping stone to get you to where you needed to be. And that's a great thing for any young person that goes, oh, maybe I'm thinking that same sort of path. Yeah, maybe do that. Maybe do the step of, go to 2 Commando first, learn your trade, because it obviously helped you going forward for SAS. And then you got to the pinnacle, and we'll talk about that now. And you go over, you do selection, and what do you remember of this selection that was different from your 2 Commando selection? What was it harder this time? But you'd already known you'd already done selection once before, and you knew, sort of had a bit of an insight to people who hadn't like come from battalion and gone straight to SASR selection. What was it like for you this time on selection? Yeah.
Can I just go back to the previous question? To sort of name a couple of things. So,
yeah, please do.
So for me at the time, I was never going to use 2 Commando as a stepping stone.
Okay.
I mean, I could have spent the rest of, for instance, if I was to, not be selected for SAS selection 2009, I would have gone back to 2 Commando and been extremely happy. Yeah. Like there's to have a career in that unit for 20 years is such a honor and a very special area to spend your service. For me, it was I did have this calling, as in I wanted to sort of see what was on the other side. Yeah. So it was. I think looking back now, you probably could see it as a stepping stone, but at the time,
maybe not stepping stone's the wrong word. Maybe
I know what you mean. Like it's just, it's because it's a progression like of skill sets,
Yeah.
and you're always
Yeah.
acquiring more skill sets
Yeah.
as you go along.
Yeah. That's sort of what I
Yeah,
meant.
I knew what you were saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's because at the time the 2 Commando, I mean, and I say this again, at the time it was 6 months long, the reinforcement cycle. I know, well, that wasn't including the CQB that's now added some more insertions, so their reinforcement cycle has gotten longer now.
Yeah.
But at the time it was Commandos was 6 months long, and SAS reinforcement cycle was 18 months long.
Yeah, right.
So that's the kind of progression of skill sets, and that's sort of going back to your earlier question was when I did cross over, it was a lot of, there's a few courses that I'd had done before.
Yeah.
Roping, demolitions, elements of the CQB, or they call it TPC over there, target prosecution continuum. So there was, but essentially a whole year there of new courses that I hadn't, probably just less than a year worth of courses that I hadn't done. So there was a lot of new skill sets that I had to learn and be competent at.
Yeah, right. And I guess, as you say, the older skills, honing in on them and polishing them, and refining and getting better at those, which it's only going to make you a better soldier, mate. Like that's exactly what it does. If anything that you learn and get better and better at, you're only going to get better. Like
exactly.
So and so you start selection, and how many started selection with you, and how many finished selection?
Yes. So on that selection, there was, I think, about 135, give or take, started. 29 completed it. And I think either 20 or 21 got selected to commence training.
Yeah, right.
And then at the end of the 18 months, I think 15 of us ended up getting beret.
Yeah, right. So very
big cull.
Yeah, big attrition rate. Pretty. Yeah,
absolutely. And there was guys getting removed and returned to units on the last course of reinforcement cycle.
Yeah, right. So almost through, and oh, how heartbreaking would that be, mate? Like that's
very heartbreaking. I couldn't imagine going through that and then on the last course getting being removed. It's very heartbreaking.
Absolutely. So you done your selection, you're on your Rio cycle, and what insertion course were you on? And you lost your best mate, Jason Brown, halfway through this course, and what effect did that have on you going forward with, to finish your Rio cycle?
Yeah, so that was, on the last course of Rio, and I think it was probably within a month of starting that course, 13th of August 2010, and I got a phone call from, it was early in the morning, probably about 5:30 from Brownie's best mate, his civilian mate Biffo, and he'd just been obviously in a very bad way emotionally, and just said, that they've received call that Brownie had been killed overseas. And we were waking up just in the morning and ready to go to PT and start, doing some diving serials that day. And I got wind before pretty much anyone, definitely on the water course, but most of the people from the unit. So obviously I think probably the CO and RSM knew at that stage, but it hadn't filtered down through the hierarchy at that stage, because there's obviously the next of kin had just been informed. So, I just could not believe what was happening. So then I told my mate, or told some of the guys on the course, and then went to inform the hierarchy of what's happened, and they sort of looked at me going, "What are you talking about, mate?" Like, it's like, nah, I'm like, I've just been called by Brownie's best mate, who's contacted by his parents, like they're that close that this has happened. And so they obviously started sort of doing the ring around and informing sort of the hierarchy of sort of like a bottom up approach instead of the bottom down. And so then I was like, okay, well, we'll just have to, I'm on water course, so last course of Rio, still the hardest course I've ever done in the army, to be honest. 3 months of being wet, cold, hungry, and tired. So it was, it was some cool stuff. But yeah, it was definitely a ball breaker, that's for sure. So that happened, and then I think for about a week there was a lot of repatriation, sort of organisation, administration, funeral, all that type of thing. So for about a period of about a week there, but we're still on course, so we still did, still training as per usual, and I ended up going back and doing the ramp ceremony held in Perth on the way through, where Jace's family come over on the back of the, I can't remember, it was it was a C-130. I think pretty sure it was a C-130. Could have been a C-70. I can't remember exactly, but on the back of the aircraft, they had a ramp ceremony for the guys in Perth, and then there's repatriation continued on to Sydney.
Yep.
For his funeral. Yeah.
And for you, because you were very close, you best mates. You went to commandos to get. You were at 1RAR together as well, or
Brownie was in 1RAR before going to 2 Commando. But he was Alpha Company and then went to Recon. So what was it? I think for that East Timor trip, the guys within that, I think it was 6-3 Alpha. I think there's
And then so you two were very close. Obviously, you were at 2 Commando together. You obviously you were going through your selection, and Jace was already over there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, and I guess for you, because you guys were so close, was his death, it just like for you, did that make the hunger to get your beret? Like, was like looking back now, was that sort of because you guys were very close. Was that like I want to finish this now and become beret qualified, or looking back in hindsight, or?
For me, it was just a matter of just trying to, like, emotionally, I was just a wreck. Like, I didn't have time to have any foresight or have any, I suppose, plan of what I wanted to do. It was, I just couldn't believe it, because we lived next door to each other.
Yeah.
Like, literally, when I was still on Rio, I haven't even had my beret. I haven't even qualified as a SAS operator yet, but I think it was, we lived in Subiaco together and literally right next to each other.
Yeah.
It was literally like a Seinfeld and Kramer type scenario where, our doors were never locked and literally lived, 1 meter away next door across the hall. So, I'll take the spot of Kramer to give him the, the prestigious Seinfeld character. But it was literally like that set up where it was, we always used to have guys come around and, on Rio and his squadron mates at the time, and you literally lived next door. So it was a lot of good time sort of after hours as well. But then there was a whole process then of, because I actually dropped Brownie on base before he left.
Yeah.
I dropped him off, and he actually said to me, he goes, if anything happens, can you make sure that, all the administration and that's taken care of from this end? So when all this happened, I was like, I couldn't believe it. Like, just like kind of trying to think of shit. What did he say? Like, what was, what did I promise him that, because I was like, as soon as he said, I said, mate, don't worry about it. Like,
you'll come home.
Don't be silly. You'll come back. And then sort of, I remember it, shook his hand and then at the front gate, and then as he walked in, and that was the last time I ever saw him in the flesh. So then, because I promised him that, I obviously informed the hierarchy. So I had, a few of us guys that were really close to him, organised that administration around it. It was a very emotional time, like very emotional.
Man, I can understand. Yeah.
So when it came to the beret parade, it was kind of, for me, it was a bittersweet. It was a really, good time, as in proud time, but also I lost, my best mate.
Yeah.
Less than 2 months earlier.
And mate, I'm sitting here because I'm actually sitting here in your place, like actually up in Brisbane, and it's great to be here with you, and because and you were one that I wanted to interview in person, because mate, I know how hard it is to talk about the loss of mates. Like I've lost a couple myself, and it is hard, mate. And I really appreciate you, sharing with. And we spoke about this before we got on, of talking about Brownie, and it's, mate, I appreciate you sharing your memories of him, because it is hard, but I think for you, it's. Like we will go into now, like receiving your beret, as you said, that was a proud moment for you. Like the hard work, the sacrifices, because it is a sacrifice, mate. You've got to sacrifice so much to achieve this dream. And for you, like you said, the satisfaction of, this was something you'd earned, you'd worked hard for, and, whether or not, and I'm very much like you, a believer in faith. Brownie was with you that day. Like, I know it sounds, he was with you that day that you received your beret, and so for you, you get your beret, and then what's the tempo like when you get into the squadron? Was it busy getting ready for your third deployment or to Afghanistan?
I was incredibly lucky that I jumped straight onto a mountaineering course in January. So we qualified and had a beret parade in maybe around November, sort of towards the end of the year. And and then literally there was a lot of the guys from one squadron were busy doing, different things or whatever. And then there was a couple of open slots on a mountaineering course run in Colorado in the US.
Oh, wow.
And they
Yeah,
asked me
right.
if I wanted to do it. I was just like, yes. How come there's a vacant spot here? Like, what, But I ended up, me and two other guys off Rio ended up going straight. The guys that went to one squadron went straight from Rio, and then went on a 6-7 week mountaineering course in Colorado in the US in the January.
Yeah, right.
And then we deployed, mid-year. For one squadron over to Afghan in 2011.
Yeah, right.
So it was incredible. Like, just the timing of it is just, I'm incredibly lucky to be able to sort of jump from one thing to the next, and then I love climbing, I love mountaineering, and I hadn't been to the US at that stage. Just for me, it was just like, wow, this is this is a dream come true.
And I guess for you, in a sense, mate, of when you joined the army, back in 2002, to be like, wow, I'm now in America doing, I'm seeing the world and I'm getting paid to do it. Like, it's pretty cool.
I just remember back in 1RAR, if you had a silver compass and a snug pack 3, you were considered switched as. But now to be in the, special forces and the SAS in particular, where you just get all these all this equipment thrown at you, issued, really good stuff, and all these carabiners, climbing equipment. I could not believe just how lucky we were to be involved in that type of training, but also with the resources as well. As literally like a kid in a candy store. It was crazy.
And you were obviously developing at this stage as well. You were developing your yoga skills a bit more as well. So were you studying a bit more at that time, or
not really? No. So I was still on reinforcement cycle, especially during CQB. When a lot of body armor and all that type of thing. Whenever I could, I'd go to Bikram's Yoga in Perth.
Yeah, okay.
Which I was dragging sometimes 4 to 5 different SAS guys to an evening Bikram's Yoga session on our CQB course or TPC course, because everyone's been on body armor all day and everyone's backs was all tight and locked up. So that was guys were enjoying it.
And that for you, obviously, you mentioned you knew the benefits of how it helped you in 2007. Yep. And for some of the guys, they would have been the same. Oh my God, this is amazing. Like to feel the pressure of releasing, and I guess for you, as you said, it prolonged your Special Forces career, and it probably helped some of the other guys too that were looking for something to go. Oh, geez, my back. So that was that would have been good. And obviously, you talk about your third trip. So we get to your third trip was that was. You go over with one squadron, and what was different from this trip to your first two trips, and the country? Obviously, you deployed in 2006. this is 5 years later that you'd come back. What was it like in 2011? What was that trip like?
Yeah, so I deployed in 2008 as well.
Yeah,
so it was probably maybe 3 years later.
3 years later, yep.
Yeah, and obviously you keep sort of tabs and stories and that happen from other rotations because you're on reinforcement cycle, but there's still an SOTG every 6 months or every 5 months over there. So you're still trying to keep up as much as possible on what the current battle space looks like.
Yep.
But getting back, so in 2011 was really when we were doing counter leadership targeting operations, FE Alpha.
Yep.
And that was honestly like, I remember that first night that I was telling you before how I locked up in 1RAR and there was choppers flying around, and then I thought that was the army life. Like every night, people were fast roping or probably not fast roping in 1RAR, well, definitely not fast roping in 1RAR, rappelling and doing suspended extraction. But when we went over to Afghanistan, it was like that. We had all the helos there, and it wasn't dedicated to us solely, but it was that trip we had helo periods of, it varied each rotary wing period. That's what we'd call it. And usually it'd be last 3 or 4 days, sometimes 5 days. And then we'd have a period off in between to wait to literally when the helos weren't assigned to us.
Yep.
And then we'd get them again and again. And that was consistent throughout the whole trip. And that was, I think maybe the rotation, the SOTG before us, FE Alpha had that, maybe the one before, but it was the first time I'd been experienced in that situation where you were fully supported with helo airframes.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And it was, for that IED factor too, it was a lot safer. But at the same time, it was obviously adds in this extra complications too. I mean, it's considering, all you have to do is look back in recent history of the amount of times that helos have dropped out of the sky. So it comes in with its own risk factors and weather and all that type of thing. But it's better than driving on the road and getting hit by IEDs, that's for sure.
Oh, but, 100%.
So that was the first time where it was just like a rotary wing period on and off and consistently. And it was incredible to be a part of, and just an eye-opener as a soldier because I've always, I'd been fairly experienced or very experienced up until that. And then to add on to that, doing the type of operations that this included was, it's just an eye-opener, and it was a pinch yourself moment as well, where I was just, I couldn't believe that I was actually part of FE Alpha,
right.
And being just not it, the operations definitely going out on the ground, which is the funnest part, but the lifestyle surrounding it too on base was really supportive as well, as in it was just a well-oiled machine. You had a lot of supporting elements working very hard and very long to get you everything that you needed to go out on an individual, like a person of interest or a member of the Taliban that was on the JPEL list, Joint Priority Effects list. So it was a lot of intelligence, a lot of planning, but also a lot of different areas wherever the intelligence would sort of gather and where they were on the ground at the time, because it changed, within a snapshot, within a matter of 2 or 3 seconds. Your whole mission could be called on or off or change a totally different area.
And this trip for you was obviously, as you said, it was different to the first two. It was the first, airborne, flying. Was that, and at that stage, was that where you were going into Helmand province and outside Uruzgan itself, and intertwining with the other special forces from around the world, or was it mainly still the contingent of Australians, or what was it like this time?
So we were working with American pilots.
Yep.
That was who we were working with essentially every day. When it come to other special forces troops, we really just operated by ourselves.
Yeah, okay.
We did go into different provinces around. Just trying to recall, I don't think we ever went into Helmand province on that trip.
Yep.
We definitely went into Kandahar, Zabul province, and right up to northern areas of Oruzgan province.
Yeah,
so,
right.
We
Okay.
did bounce around different provinces.
Yeah. And I suppose that would have been different in itself, because like you said, in the 2006, it was let's go out and see, and you probably bit of intelligence gathering and getting to those provinces, because you obviously didn't know as much because you're obviously going to different provinces.
Yeah.
So it would have been a bit of similar to, all right, let's go and have a look, and obviously without breaking secret stuff, like just let's go and have a look, let's investigate and see what's there, and sort of that sort of thing. Or
yeah, I mean, in Afghanistan, this is well documented. Like the tactics of the enemy change within different provinces.
Yeah,
I mean, sometimes the terrain's a bit different. Sometimes they just haven't had that much of experience dealing with certain coalition forces.
Yeah.
Like I know it's different for when the SOTG guys roll around to, say, a general army.
Yep.
Or in different armies from different nations too operate differently. So everywhere you went, especially in the different provinces, the enemy behaved and their tactics were different. So which was interesting, but it was never a known. It was always an unknown.
Yeah, right, okay. And I guess for you, because you'd seen the country on the ground, and seeing it from the air. I've heard a few other veterans say it's such a beautiful country. Like it's such, like some of the, you would have seen some beautiful, the mountain tops with snow, and what was that like, seeing it from the air? Like it would have been a pretty surreal sort of, wow, this country's beautiful.
Oh yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean the Hindu Kush. I mean that's you hear about the Hindu Kush when you're younger, so it's sort of riddled in a long history of Alexander the Great and the Mongols coming all over that area, and so there's got a rich history there.
Yeah,
and those mountains there, they've just got a presence about them, and it's just incredible. Especially coming from a mountaineering background and climbing as well. I just really appreciated the mountains there, and just it was always sometimes it was a bittersweet moment, because you sit there and appreciate it, but then sometimes you go, okay, now someone will say you have to go up the top of that, and you'd be like, oh shit. Maybe it's not. It's not so pretty now when you're humping sort of 50, 60 kilos up it, but
and the altitude too, mate, is
exactly
very different to any altitude that you've faced back home. So and that adds an element too. It's like, oh geez, this is more tiring than unbelievable.
Oh, definitely, and that was additionally on that trip. Our patrol had the privilege of going on a couple of SR patrols. So so that was. I think one of our patrols, we were 60 kilometres north of any coalition forces. Wow. We had another patrol on the ground sweeping through on motorbikes, but we were sitting there, observing in an overwatch position, and we were just by ourselves, six guys, and just obviously providing an in picture on the ground there. But we were there for 5 or 6 days, and it's just been a part of that too, which was polar opposites to the targeting that we were conducting there. So to have that variety, and within a matter of a few days, totally change what equipment you have to set up, weapons, all that type of thing, to go onto a different type of orientation of a mission was incredible too.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that trip, did you have any? Did you lose any guys on that one, or that one was?
No.
Yeah, okay, that one. Yeah, right. And was that a 6-month deployment, that one, or was that a shorter?
About 4.5, 5 months.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. And then obviously, so you come back. So you come back from your third deployment, and then then you're obviously gearing up again, high tempo rotation, getting ready for your fourth trip. What year was your fourth trip that your last trip to Afghanistan?
2013.
Okay, yeah, right.
Yeah, start of 2013.
And that obviously was the start of when we were looking to pull assets out of. And what was different about this trip compared to all the other trips that you've been on?
Yeah, so this one, it was interesting because for this trip I was down in Kandahar, and it was actually around that time where President Obama had announced the withdrawal, the slow withdrawal from Afghanistan, and it was being down in Kandahar and seeing, because that was the main, well, Kandahar airfield, that was the main base for southern Afghanistan, so everything passed in and out through there.
Yeah.
And to see the military industrial complex start packing things up and shipping back to America was a sight to be seen. I mean, the equipment and the resources, you know, you've got, not only do you have sort of fast jets taken off day and night, but you also had, you know, the C-17 Globemasters coming in, all multinations sort of using this airfield, and it was just it was literally like, you know, you picture yourself at Sydney Airport or Brisbane Airport, like it's and having a suburb around an airport. That was what it was essentially like having a whole town around this airfield. It was pretty crazy, yeah.
Yeah, right. And I guess for you, because you'd done so many tours, was it like, okay, this at that stage for you, was it like, okay, we can sort of see that there is an end coming here, like this could be the last time that I do deploy? Or
well, I had that thought, and also on that trip in particular, I was doing a lot of, I used to love running, so I was running around the airfield, around Kandahar airfield a lot, and it was when my calf muscle kept tearing.
Yeah, okay.
So that was very frustrating for me at the time. So then I had to, in between my calf muscle tearing, I would just jump on the bike but in the gym. So that's what I used to do for my cardio, was jumping on the bike instead of running. So literally it would probably happen 4 or 5 times on that trip where my calf tore. So I'd tear it, and then I'd jump on the bike for 5 or 6 weeks, and then sort of try and put some strength into it, go for another run, tear it.
Yeah.
Okay, another 5, 6 weeks. So that was frustrating for me, because that's, you know, probably what the most important thing you can do as a soldier is run and be physically fit. So when I had that, it wasn't my Achilles heel, so to speak, but it was a calf. So it was like almost had the same effect, which it was very frustrating for me. And I kind of knew then that I had to put in some serious work, as into the rehab sector, but also it was that towards the end of that trip was when, my mental health was really noticeable to me. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And that's, we'll get into we'll talk about that now. And you came back from your 4th tour of Afghan, and the high tempo with Tag East, Tag West, you suffered burnout, and your career actually in Special Forces ended sort of not how you wanted it to. It sort of, with all the high tempo, you wanted it longer, obviously wanted it longer to stay in the regiment longer, but obviously the high tempo and everything that happened, and you mentioned your mental health was you could start to see that things were happening for you, and you left the regiment, and then you found what you do now is your... and
Qigong.
Thank you. Yes, that's. I was like, I'm gonna murder that name. So I'll let you say it.
No.
So you found this, and
you're not the first one. All the last two.
No.
Have troubles with the pronunciation.
That's why I thought I'd let you do that one, mate. And what was that like for you? Obviously, you know, you'd reached the pinnacle, and how hard was it to walk away from Special Forces?
Oh, very hard. Yeah, at that point in time, it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. But at the time, the road isn't clear. Like, looking back now, the road's clear, you know, to what happens and what eventuates. Yeah. But at the time, it was a lot of uncertainty, doubt. You know, at that at that stage, I had undiagnosed mental health conditions. So all of that as well on top of, you know, leaving you know, this life that you had been living for, at that stage, 12 years. So it was all that mixed in together. And it was incredibly hard, because that your identity is wrapped around, you know, being a soldier and an SF soldier. Yeah. So I remember on the end of the 2011 trip, actually, that the OC of the squadron got up in front of everyone and was saying sort of the end of trip sort of spiel, and he said, "Guys, what you're doing now isn't normal. Jumping on helos, kicking doors in, killing bad guys, or like obviously he didn't say that exactly, along those lines, he goes, what you're doing isn't normal." And like I remember hearing that, just saying, "What's he talking about?" Like, to me, it was normal. There was day-to-day business of being an SF soldier, kicking doors in, closing with the enemy, all that type of thing. And I couldn't understand. I remember vividly just thinking, this is normal business. This is day-to-day business for us. And because I'd been living that life for 12 years. And it was, in hindsight, he was exactly right. Like, it is not normal. And I think it's something that only guys can appreciate now that the conflict's over, now that guys have discharged, and now looking back, trying to make sense of their transition into civilian life and the whole identity thing, and now looking back going, yeah, that definitely wasn't normal.
No, that's right.
And thank God that it wasn't normal, because there's a whole life that awaits for you outside of service, and it's just about trying to reconnect with that. But there was a time at the end of the 2011 trip where the OC got up and said that, and I had no idea at the time what he was talking about, and he was dead right.
Yeah, right. And how important for you was it to find your? I'll let you say the
Qigong.
Yeah, Qigong again. How important was that in your process of getting to that stage of, as you mentioned, civilian where you are now, and how important was finding that for you?
Oh, it was instrumental. I mean, if I hadn't have gone down the yoga path and then found the Qigong afterwards, I definitely wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you.
Yeah,
and
right.
Not only here talking to you, but have the mental and emotional capacity to be able to actively engage and communicate with you. I just wouldn't have had it.
Yeah, right. Okay. So.
And for me, it was learn, because with the yoga, it was a very yang style of yoga. I mean, Bikram's yoga, and also what I got into, Ashtanga yoga. It's a very physically dynamic, and one that's stimulating for the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, coming from at that stage, it was probably 15-year career. Like, I needed something that was calming for my nervous system, and my body was riddled with injuries, and I couldn't do a lot of the physical aspects of different yoga sequences. Yeah. So with the Qigong, it's sort of like Tai Chi. Most people are fairly common, or have an understanding of what Tai Chi is. So a lot of breathing and movement, but it's soft and gentle movement, which is for the veteran space, it's actually what someone that's spent a long time in the Defence Force, or even someone that's had a lot of stress induced onto their nervous system. The Qigong is very powerful, because you look at the sort of the yin yang. Yeah. It's if you're out of balance, if you've led a incredibly stimulating and yang lifestyle and life, then of course, to bring back balance, you've got to do something that's total opposite of what you've never done before. And for most people, we chatted quickly about it beforehand. You do something opposite that to bring back the balance, and that generally is something soft, something that connects you with your breath. It's not external, it's internal, and you slow down and you actually start taking notice of what's going on in your mind and in your body. And as a yoga, Qigong, meditation teacher, the hardest thing for me as a teacher, and I tell people this all the time, but is to slow down and look after yourself.
Self-care.
That stuff is, we're so busy these days, and people feel almost guilty about slowing down and investing time in yourself and looking after yourself, listening to the cues of your mind and your body, and for most people it's very confronting, because we've neglected that and ignored it for so long. So my hardest task is to try and actually get people to slow down and look after themselves.
And from a veteran and first responders perspective, which you do a lot in that space now, helping veterans and first responders, is that something that is like they come to you and they, after they've done a few sessions with you, they can see the change, and you can obviously see the change working with them?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So it's been a busy 5 years. Like, I was running courses with Master Yang with the Warrior Revivals, and they were 10-day programs, and we ran 7 of those. And to see the change from day 1 to day 10 is mind blowing. Like, and not in the literal sense, calm the mind, but mind blowing is a bit of a play on words there. Yeah. But it actually exceeds your expectations.
Yeah, right.
And I think one of the participants actually said this himself, so I'm stealing one of his sentences because he put it so beautifully, that you actually probably go into these programs, especially a 10-day program with Master Yang, and you are probably limited in your views, or you're limited in what is achievable within 10 days.
Yeah. And
that's exactly right. Like, it's so many times where, guys, and we documented this, we ran studies, and achieved statistically significant results of, 30% reduction in mental health symptoms within 10 days and out to 2 to 3 months later. So that was actually documented through a pilot study.
Yeah, right.
So
okay.
That's, this area is so needed in the veteran space, but also the emergency services, but also just in the general society. There's so much stress levels out there these days. That just to slow down and to learn how to breathe and move properly, because it's a skill set as well. You have to learn. It's incredibly, you can get some incredible results relatively quick too. But then it's a matter of keeping the consistency, like anything.
Yeah.
I mean, you yourself know with all the training that you do of how consistency is key, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So it's like the way, to calm your mind and your nervous system is the same principles as trying to gain fitness. You can't go to the gym once a month or go for 1 or 2 runs and expect to be able to run a marathon. It just doesn't happen like that.
Same, you can't go to the gym and then go to McDonald's and splurge out on all the food. You just can't do that.
Exactly. So it's about, number one is learning it in an environment where teachers know and experience, and especially dealing with, comorbidities of, PTSD, major depression, anxiety, all that. Like, it's very complex demographic. So you really need people that are experienced in the area. And to be honest, there's not many people in that field with the mind-body area that have had results with a lot of the soldiers. Yeah, there's a little bit through the American but Australia is very well behind. Yeah. But then you also need to do it consistently. So there also needs to be a support structure for the number 2. So consistency and support structure of, once you've learnt it, to do it consistently. Yep. And that's a matter of each day or in your weekly routine or whatever that is, 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 times a week, is to go through the process of the moving and the breathing and do that consistency, because it gets results. Yeah. So it's just trying to embed those couple of key things to produce those longer term effects.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get to, I wanted to put that in because it's so important. It's been so important in your recovery and also your journey to transition. I wanted to bring that in there, and then I want to talk now about your final 3 years within defence. You spent with 1 intelligence battalion. How did you find being back in the regular army after having served 12 years in the special forces space, and how hard was that?
Yeah, it was extremely difficult to say the least, and it's a big step for anyone just to do that transition from SOCOmmand to conventional army. And for me, but I had at that stage undiagnosed mental health issues as well, and burnout, all that type of thing. So it was difficult for a few reasons, but just being in SOCOmmand, 2 Commando, SAS, the operational focus is paramount. I mean, you're under no illusions in that environment. It's like you're there to get deployed on operations. Coming back to regular army, it's a different... Yeah, people are deploying all the time, but it's not... There's still a lot of people that are left behind in Australia in your unit that are still going Monday to Friday, normal, typical weeks, right? Yeah, little small, my experience, small groups are getting sent over doing different things, but it's never a battalion effort or a squadron effort, that people get sent over at that time. So for me, it was a reminder of why I left 1RAR to start off with as well. Things, sometimes in life, things come full circle.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things, the lessons that I learnt in 1RAR, or thought I'd realise, but was, and for example of that was just being in a battalion unit that was sporties, was a Thursday sporties. Yeah, right. Back in the... Because sporties is in SO Commando, there's no sporties. Yeah, there's no time for take the Thursday off to play sport. It just doesn't happen, and for good reason. But being back in that, where it's like Thursdays is pretty much a write-off, it's kind of... I just could not believe that. I mean, I welcomed it in a sense because I was burnt out, and have that day that was, you're not really working that hard, or not being put under too much stress was for me welcomed. But at the same time, to have that focus shift, was a big difference as well. And I'm not sure what it's like these days with sporties and that, but I do remember when I was back in 1RAR, that's Thursday sporties, it was a thing. People used to get dragged off exercises to go back and play footy or basketball. Right, okay. So it was like definitely a thing. But you'd have to ask maybe some of the other guys that sort of have been in the battalion for the last few years to actually ask if that's a thing or not these days. But it definitely was when I was in. I'm just trying to think of other things. Also the equipment too. In SAS and 2 Commando, the resources that you have are second to none. You really, there's a lot of equipment, a lot of resources there to be thrown at you to use. Going back to regular army, it's not like that. Any new bit of kit takes years and years of procurement, testing to be able to, to the end state of having a soldier wear all the kit. The process is much longer, and you're in a bigger pool. And being at the 1 battalion, you're down in the pecking order because obviously you've got the online brigades, you've got the combat units, the infantry and all that get first pick. And so it should be, but, so you're going from, being supported at the pointy end, the spear tip to going down, still supporting them. I mean, the 1 battalion, there was a lot of different operations going on. So there was, still an operational focus, but it was a different focus type thing. There was, it was different. So just getting used to that. Also, I was sort of had my different, at that stage, I was, my injuries were there. So I was getting all my DVA stuff planned. So I had sort of different things to try and plan for. Yeah. But it was definitely an experience. And it's interesting because anyone that served in a military unit, you have different personalities there, from the high performers to the not so well performers, and I think everyone in a military unit, or even not even military unit, but any organisation in a civilian sector can attest to, the different levels, I suppose, of not only competencies, but attitudes and mindsets as well. I mean, at that unit, the 1 battalion, there was a handful of incredibly smart people doing their job, and a different type of character to what it was in Special Forces, but at the same time, it needs to be that way because they're doing a different job, but they're, a lot of those guys there are exceptionally smart and incredibly good at doing their job. Yeah. There's also some people that weren't so good as well, but you get that exactly. So
So you, in 2020, you made the decision to discharge from the army after 19 years of service. What made you come to that decision?
Well, for me, I actually got kicked out.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. Right. So it was all my injuries. Like I said before, I was going through the process of getting them documented. Yep. And sort of my med records went to Canberra, and that was the end of it, mate. They they essentially said, no, this is your discharge date. And I wanted to stay in. I wanted to stay in a different capacity to what I was doing. I wanted to do at least 2 or 3 days a week and serve in, because, you know, I spent at that stage, 18, 19 years in the Defence Force, and I had a lot of different areas where I could have value added and improved. But anywhere I worked, I would have, you know, gone in there with a team effort mindset and been able to contribute to whatever tasks they had. And I really felt that, and that's what I wanted to do. I never wanted to leave, and I could still do all my qigong and yoga and meditation stuff, but still have one foot in the door and still provide 2 or 3 days a week to the army. But at that stage, they didn't want to hear it, you know, and into the stage where I had the CEO of the 1 Battalion, which is a great guy, even was backing me with a letter trying to promote the MECRB to, you know, make sure they're coming to the right decisions in kicking me out. And I wrote a letter and all that type of thing, tried to stay in, and then, they just didn't want to hear it. So they just said, no, this is your discharge date and this is happening. So that was it. And now looking, you know, I don't want to get too much into the current day scenario, but, you know, you look at the retention crisis that's happening within the ADF at the moment. And I just know from my personal experience of how much incredibly talented, experienced soldiers that the Defence Force has let go over the past 10 years. And if they had been smarter and more strategic in the way they conduct themselves in a retention mindset, mate, they would not be in the crisis they are at the moment.
Oh, mate.
You know, people would never, you know, in whatever, obviously people move on and do different things, but to have the option there that people that wanted to still contribute later on down the track, there was just no option for it. Now they're only just cottoning on to, you know, different categories of service and all that type of thing now, but
it's too late.
It's too late.
It's too late.
People have moved on, and it's a different scenario now.
Well, mate, I look at it and in a sense of that, mate, they invested millions of dollars in all these soldiers and people that have got fantastic skills that have just walked out the door. Like, you know, like that's millions of dollars that they've invested in you and others that they could use in other capacities that they've just, you know, and as you say,
absolutely,
we won't get into the, you know, the crisis of what it looks like now, but
of course,
but it's, and I guess for you, mate, that would have been a hard pill to swallow after you nearly 20 years of your life you'd given service to your country to then go, oh, well, I'm out. Like, and with all what was going on, what was that hard for you, and was that transition hard once that discharge had finally come through?
Absolutely. In some ways it was relieving as well, because I consider myself extremely lucky, as in a few different ways. I was able to, in a way, see the writing on the wall within the last few years and be able to put my DVA stuff within the system at that time, instead of waiting till you get out and sort of doing it retrospectively, all that type of thing, which comes with all its added difficulties. But also had the yoga and the qigong and the meditation to lean on, and that was, for me, was instrumental. I mean, I knew I had a different love outside of the army, which was the yoga and the qigong. You know what I mean? And I didn't have that whilst I was in. A lot of other people don't have that. They're still searching for it. So in that way, I was able to, you know, just hook in and train really hard in that. So I took the some of the traits and characteristics of the army instilled into me, you know, like discipline, focus, determination, all that, and literally put it into the yoga, qigong, meditation. And for me, that was a game changer. You know, I loved doing it, but also my mental health symptoms and my physical injuries, the symptomology of it just reduced a lot. And obviously it's a management process going forward, but I've got so much more of agency within how I conduct my day and weekly routines now, that I will, A, I know the warning signs, and B, I know what to do when the warning signs come, and I can manage that to minimize the symptoms that are lurking, because they're lurking, and if you don't take care of yourself, they come back.
Oh, they're always lurking.
Exactly. So it's like, for me, it's a but knowing having those skill sets to lean upon, and I enjoy it too,
Yeah.
was instrumental. But in saying that, still the transition is still hard. You still get that. Anzac Day is a good one where you get a bit of nostalgia about how cool you used to be and how boring you are these days. But in all seriousness though, it's still a process to transition. And you still life goes on. Life isn't a point in time where it's stationary. Now it's fluid and it keeps moving and you keep evolving and nothing's ever permanent.
But I think, mate, and I think this is a great thing that you've tapped into, is that your military service doesn't define you. Like, that's, you're Jordan outside of defence too, and that was one part of your life, and now you've got you've got a purpose again going, and that's like, the uniform doesn't define who you are. It's a part of you, but it's not you. It's not the full you. You know what I mean? Like, it's a part of your life, but you've now got a great, you've found your purpose again going forward with with all your meditations and all what you're doing now. And mate, you're still serving in other ways. You're having an impact. In my opinion, now you're having a greater impact in doing what you do now. With the class, like you're touching so many people's lives, and actually being able to, it's an amazing feeling when you can help someone get from the pain point of their life to get them to that next part. Mate, and that's purpose. That's the purpose now, and I think your military service has helped you get to that point, and it's made you. And I say this, mate, to you, and I was going to ask you this. Still, with everything you've gone through, all what's happened, was still joining the Defence Force still the best decision that you've made in your life, if you look back now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have no comparison to what it would have been without it, So it's it's hard to say 100%, but I didn't have any discipline or direction before, and now the one thing, the Army's given me a lot of, physical injuries and mental health conditions to manage moving forward, but the one thing that the military gave me was discipline and determination and the mindset to never give up. And that is, it doesn't matter what you do in life, if you have those three characteristics, man, it's going to be hard, it's never going to be easy, but you'll get through it. And I find that has rung true. I couldn't, who knows what my life would have been without those characteristics, who knows. But just going back to what you were saying before about the sense of identity with the military and, having the sense of identity and purpose afterwards, it's like my identity was wrapped around my service, and that was all I knew of life coming straight after school was Jordan the soldier, but also Jordan the special forces soldier, and that was me. And it was only through the yoga, yes, in India in 2013 when I took 4 months there, but the Qigong especially was almost the deconstructing some of the programming that went on, and I was able to mentally and emotionally drop that identity as that was my sole identity. Still a part of me, but it enabled me to go, you know what? Tap into the present moment, what's going on now, and moving forward, and being at peace with that, and that was the Qigong was the game changer in that. It really settled my nervous system, but really calmed my mind that I could tap into the present moment and be happy with who I was, regardless of what external uniform or external layer or coat I put on or role I was playing within society. It really deconstructs that and taps you into the person, your true self of who you are. So that was the game changer, and it just happened to be that I love doing it at the same time. So it feels great. So so for me it was it was hard. And I know this might sound controversial, maybe not to some people. Some people will totally get it. Some people may not. But the hardest thing that I've done to date is the Qigong, is to come back to my own calm mind and my calm nervous system. being in commandos and the SAS and going through the training was extremely hard and difficult. Not, you know, and that's just, it's fairly obvious. But at a time when you have things working for you, like you have your able body, you have your able mind, and you're able to achieve things, what happens when those get taken away from you and you still have to perform? You still have to get a result. You still have to use the discipline, the determination, the mindset to get that. So that, for me, looking forward now, what really impresses me is, it impresses me that people, you know, join the Defence Force and, you know, all this still impresses me. But I love the stories when people have had it and then they, you know, they go through extra adversity when all the things that were going for them get stripped away and they still have to perform. They still have to get to an area and get their identity back, but also just be at peace in their own body and their own minds. For me, that I just love hearing stories about that, because things just get ripped away from you, and you have to find a way. Yeah. And you have to deconstruct what the social norms are. You have to, listen to advice around you, obviously, but some people give you bad advice as well. So you have to sort through that, and that's just own obstacles depending on where you are, family, friends, society, all that type of thing. But it's like, to be able to get that internal compass aligned and be able to go in a direction and go, you know what, I'm going to go for this, is, man, that's character building, you know, and you end up learning a lot about yourself when you can calm yourself down and calm your mind. The hardest thing that a human can do is to train the mind, because everything involves the mind. Mate, everything. You can't do anything in life without the mind. So, but to train directly for the mind is its own area of expertise. You know, people take their whole lifetimes, many lifetimes, if you believe in Buddhism and, you know, all that type of thing, where it's the training the mind, and then doing the in yoga and the qigong, they call it the bottom up regulation of, you know, moving and breathing to train to calm the nervous system to calm the mind. Where the top down is using the meditation where you calm the mind to calm the body. So there's a top down or a bottom up or top down ways you can regulate, but that's different areas. So,
and I think you and I were speaking off air, mate, and Mate, I know exactly what you're talking about, because, you know, when I got to my lowest point and where I, you know, attempted my suicide, mate, it is, and I know exactly what you're talking, because I had to go and I had to confront the, you know, the demons, and I had to go in and work on the inner self, and the fight came from within. It you know, as I said to you, I'm not the person I was 7 years ago when I attempted suicide. You know, I've had to do a lot of inner work, and I know what you're talking about, the inner work from inside to really find who Adam is, the person, and be comfortable in that, you know, comfortable in that skin, and be, you know, I'm pretty centered now of who I am and what I'm about, and you know, I'm working on it every day. It's not something you can just you've got to work on it every day,
100%.
And you know, there's things that I've tried that haven't worked. There's things that I've tried that have, you know, that have been really great effect, which I've spoken to you about.
Trial and error, isn't it?
And I know exactly what from someone who I know exactly what you're talking about, and that's the true power in itself, is when you can find, you know, and I say it to anyone who struggles, is that there's going to be days where you don't want to, you know, it's you don't want to get out of bed. You don't even going to, and I had this conversation with Damien the other day. And he said exactly the same thing. He said there's days where even getting up to just make a coffee is it's such a task in itself. And I live by the mantra that, and I work with my mentor, that if you're shifting forward by 2 millimeters each day, by the end of the week, you've achieved, you know, so you always got to constantly be moving forward to just a little bit of, you know, every single day you just do something. And there's a saying that Denzel Washington, and I love Denzel Washington as an actor, where he says he used to hate the saying of, make sure you got something to fall back on, make sure you got something to... You can't see what's behind you. It's in the past. And there's a saying that he always lives by fall forward, because you can see what's coming. So if you move, it's like when you're in battle.
It's pretty wise old Denzel Washington. He's got some great quotes, hasn't he?
But it's like you said, mate. When you're moving into battle, you're moving forward to the contact. You know. So you attack that, you know, you attack that challenge and bring it, you know, and mate, that's how I've attacked the last 7 years, and mate, I'm achieving great things. Like, you know, I've just written a book, and you know, mate, I laugh and I cry at the same time, is that when my Year 6 teacher said I'd amount to nothing, and now I'm sitting talking to you, I'm a podcaster, I get to speak to amazing people like you and so many others, and it's like, it's just, I'm very blessed myself that I took the time to invest in myself and the inner fight, because
absolutely.
I've walked, as I said to you, I've walked through hell and come out the other side, and
absolutely.
I'm reaping those rewards of the hard work now. It's and it hasn't been easy. Nothing is, and any success that you have in life it doesn't come easy, and it's through hard work, and exactly what you're saying, and it leads me into, mate, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self, knowing what you know now, and would he listen?
Yeah, it's a good question. In a way, I'd tell him two things. I mean, I could just sit there and say nothing as well, but it'll all work out exactly the way it happened. But but I just think that I just say look after yourself more, and in a way that would prolong my career, because I never wanted to leave the Defence Force. And I don't look back on that with regret now, but because, I love what I do, but in a sense, and I see that for current serving members and, general society as well, but having tools in your toolbox like yoga, qigong, meditation, inbuilt into the system, into the Defence Force in a proactive approach or a prehabilitation sense, where you get in the physical aspect of de-stressing and reducing tightness and tension, but also getting the stress management on top early, because if you introduce that at an early stage in your career, then when shit does fall apart towards the end, the seed's already planted, you already have an experience in it, you already sort of know a little bit about it, so the bridge isn't as wide to cross to get to those areas. And I think that's the key. That's what I'd say to him, is just look after yourself more. And I did so to a certain degree, but I really feel like you need people with experience in that area to be able to get the maximum benefit. And I believe in the Defence Force. I believe that in the national interest, we need people to be able to protect, and we just need to make sure that those people can protect and not at the detriment of their life afterwards. That's the key point. Yeah,
absolutely. So, mate, I think that's great advice to anyone who listens to this podcast. And what other plans do you have moving forward now and into the future?
No solid plans. I mean, I'll just keep moving in the trajectory that I'm moving in now with the qigong and the meditation, and just enjoying life. For me, my priority is making sure I'm in a good mental, physically, and emotional state. And I achieve that through the practices. But I live a pretty disciplined life still. I don't drink alcohol. I limit. I know this would be very unpopular, but I don't have my coffees every day now. I'll probably have coffee maybe 2 times a week, and teas maybe once or twice. So I end up having caffeine maybe once or twice a week because it's not good for my nervous system. I do enjoy food as well. So I eat out on the weekends, but during the week is very nutritious, macro and micronutrient dense food. So it's, there's a lot of healthy lifestyle things that I use to keep on track to be able to do what I do, because teaching in the yoga and meditation, you have to live and breathe it. You have to be, the example of living a healthy lifestyle with utilizing the tools that actually work. So it's like, I couldn't get up there in front of people and just, preach off all these different things if I wasn't authentically living. For me, that's really important. And it's, just traveling in that direction of trying to pass these incredibly powerful tools onto people, especially in, my passion is helping veterans and emergency services, but also, if civilians and people around my area want to learn as well, then obviously, I run different things in that area as well. So just moving in that direction and just enjoying life, tapping into the present moment and spending more time with family and friends now. I was away for out of Brisbane for a good 16 years of my Defence Force service. So
Yep.
it's just just maintaining those relationships too with friends and family as well. Yeah.
So how do people get in contact with you, mate? If they want to, how do they follow you and get in contact with you?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, Instagram. My website is Qigong with Jordan. And so just through the website is probably the best way.
Yep.
And just get in contact that way if you're interested in learning anything. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, mate, I want to finish. There's a quote that I believe sums you up, and Jordan, your story is one of true courage, grit, and determination, achieving the top in your profession. Your story is one of true resilience and never giving up, no matter how hard it must have been. And the quote is, "You will never do anything in this world without courage. It is the greatest quality of the mind next to honour." And with having courage, those who dare to dream really do win, and who dares wins. And that's the motto of the SAS, mate. And I really believe this sums you up and your story. And I want to thank you for your service to our country. And I want to thank you for the work that you do for veterans and first responders and many others who are struggling with mental health issues. I appreciate you coming on True Blue Conversations and sharing your story. It's been an honour and a privilege to have you on True Blue Conversations. So, Jordan, thank you so much, mate.
No worries, Adam. Yeah, thanks for appreciate you coming out here and interviewing me and being interested in my story. And thank you for sharing your story too, which is incredibly important too.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. See you on the front line.